everyone. I'm Krista Cowan. I am the corporate genealogist here at Ancestry. And joining me today is Angie Bush from Ancestry ProGenealogist. Angie, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, well, today's topic is an Ask Me Anything session. So lots of you have been asking for longer Q&As on our Wednesday virtual events. And so we thought this would be a perfect opportunity to bring Angie on. And between the two of us, I think we can probably answer just about any question you could throw at us. I always toy around with the idea of calling these sessions Stump the Genealogist instead of Ask Me Anything. But it is really, truly ask me anything. You can ask any question. We just aren't necessarily going to answer any questions. So let me give you a little bit of some guidelines or parameters so that we can keep this conversation moving forward today. So if you watched the session from a couple of weeks ago that I did with Paul Graham, Paul talked about when and where and why and how you might want to hire a professional genealogist. And so if you specifically have any follow-up questions from that conversation, Angie and I would both love to hear those and to field those questions. Two, if there's just something you've always been dying specifically to ask a professional genealogist about what it's like to be a professional genealogist, what our day-to-day work looks like, what we might do differently than a hobbyist genealogist does. Those, we would love to answer those kinds of questions. And then, of course, if we have time, if you have other family history related or ancestry related questions, we'll do our best to try to get through as many of those as possible. So I'm actually going to play moderator probably a little bit more than not and let Angie field the bulk of these, I suspect. But let's go ahead and let's see. I'm just skimming through the questions. And okay, here's a good one. Here's a softball to start with, Angie.
Okay. All right.
When you're thinking about how you set up like tree structure or tree organization, like things like how do I name my tree or what do I need special naming for my images, that kind of thing. When you think about like how you just organize the work that you do, are there some best principles that professional genealogists use that we could learn from for the rest of us?
Okay. So that's a great question. There are some things that we do at ProGen that are kind of standard in the way that we name documents, in the way that we name photos and trees. So what we like to do is do the last name first, then the first name of the people that are in the photo, and then an approximate birth year for the primary person in the document that we're looking at, and then kind of a brief description of what that is. That's our system and kind of how we name all of our documents when we're doing client-based research. Now, in terms of the transcription of the document, we'll keep a transcription or include other details in the details field on Ancestry in the gallery and those options so that we can capture all of that additional data. We want the names of the documents themselves to not get too long, because if they get too long and include too much information, they become unwieldy. So usually that first name, last name, a birth date, and then an approximate year of the event for whatever that photo document piece of information is. That's how we name that. In terms of naming our trees, we name them with the client that we're working with. That's the name of the tree, but I name my personal tree. I've named it with my 4 grandparent lines. So I know that that's my main tree that I'm working with. So you can really name your tree anything you want, but try to make it something descriptive that's going to help other users know what's in there. And then, as always, there is a field on Ancestry where you can put a little bit more description of what is in your tree, what you're researching, who your family names might be,
Yeah,
what your
thank
family
you.
names might be.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think you literally can name your tree whatever you want. I think one of the reasons why ProGen has a naming standard is because they often work on multiple trees at a time. And so if you plan to have more than 1 or 2 trees, having a naming standard will help you find them quickly because you'll know what to be looking for. But if you're just going to have 1 or 2 or 4 trees for your family, then you can name them whatever you want, because that list won't be long.
Nope, it won't be.
Okay. Okay. So Paula asks, or was it Paula? No, it was Jimmy. Jimmy asks, do professional genealogists ever get to do their own family history research?
I know some of my colleagues do. I personally, I don't remember the last time that I worked on anything for myself. I know I've got colleagues, Paul Graham, in fact, I know he works on his own family history and he has some projects on the side that he is working on. And I have other colleagues, a lot of colleagues, frankly, that still do. I just have not I haven't worked on my own family history as much as I would have liked to. The only time I tend to work on it is when I am work needing examples for a lecture or something that I'm teaching. I go to my own family to get those, and then I end up poking around and doing some research. So I wish it wasn't that way, but when you do it all day, it kind of you don't have enough time to also come home and then do work on your own family history. So great question though. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, the room I'm in,
Oh no.
um, pardon me, the room I am in keeps going dark. Just one
Oh no.
second.
Sometimes when you sit in a room with motion lights, you have to move.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so Angie is in a little bit of a different situation than I am. So Angie, because she works for Ancestry she does client research, which was the other part of Jimmy's question, which is like, is that what you primarily do? And yes, like when you work for a professional genealogy research firm or you are a professional genealogist, independent contractor, you're almost always primarily working 6, 7 hours a day on actual client family history research. And so, yeah, some people just don't want to do what they do it in the day as their hobby at night as well. I'm in a little bit of a different position. I'm the corporate genealogist at Ancestry, which means I'm primarily responsible for external and internal family history education. So my job is to teach people how to do family history. And so I am not doing other people's family trees all day, which means I have a little bit more of a tolerance for doing my own in my off hours. So some of you know that my dad and I spend every Sunday night together. I call him at 9:30 p.m. Mountain Time. He's in an hour earlier time zone, and we get on FaceTime and we both have our computers in front of us and we work on our family history together, typically for about 4 or 5 hours. You should never see me on a Monday morning. I always look like I haven't slept because I haven't. um, and so I do that. And then during the week, then also anytime we have to test anything at Ancestry, anytime I need to look and see if something's working the way it should or shouldn't be from either new product features or feedback that we're getting from customers, I almost always use my own tree to do that testing by actually like finding a hint and saving it or going and doing a search or like doing the activities that that the users need feedback on or testing done on. And so I'm using my own tree for that. So I managed to sneak in just a little bit, just enough of my own family history research as part of my day job, which is fantastic. So a luxury that most professional genealogists do not have. Okay, let's see what other questions we've got. You guys have so many great questions. Okay, Betty is asking, she says, I just turned 81 and I'm planning for when I'm no longer here. Any recommendations for what suggestions she should leave for her family, or what happens to her trees when she dies, or how she should be thinking about making plans for that?
Okay, for that one, Ancestry, I believe, and Krista may know more, you may know more about this than me, but we've just implemented a legacy contact. And so when you pass away, it asks for your legacy contact and where all that information is going to go. Um, and so that is one way to kind of preserve and make sure your information goes to the right place. Another idea that I heard from a genealogist who's a rather accomplished genealogist. His name's Tom Jones. He was the editor of the National Genealogical Society quarterly for many, many years. He's a fellow. He's the phenomenal genealogist, but he has suggested, or his approach is to make sure that you publish your information in as many places as you can, and you share it in as many places as you can, so that your research is preserved. And nobody else, the people that come after you, don't have to go then and repeat your research. So the two big things I would say is make sure you have that legacy contact in your Ancestry account and with that information, so someone has control of that, and then share your research, publish it in as many places as you can.
Love that. Fantastic. And for those of you who are new or aren't aware, on Ancestry, in addition to setting up that legacy contact in your account settings, you also have the choice of making your tree public or private. Public trees on Ancestry just means anyone with an Ancestry subscription can see the dead people in your family tree. So that is like one way of publishing, is to have your tree public on Ancestry. You also have the ability to share your tree with anyone that you choose, and they do not have to have a subscription to Ancestry to view the tree. They just need to have their own email login to Ancestry. And so if you want to share it, Betty, with your grandkids or your nieces and nephews, so that as many of them have access to that tree as possible, that's another great way to make sure that the work that you've put into your family tree perpetuates. Okay, Patricia, I'm just going to answer your question really quickly because I've seen it come up a couple of times here. You're asking about how you access previous sessions like that one that I did with Paul Graham a few weeks ago. If you just go to ancestry.com/education, you're going to see our upcoming 3 events at the top of the page. That's where you register for these live Zoom events. Of course, you can always watch the replay a few days later on the Ancestry YouTube channel. But if you scroll down on that page, again, the URL is ancestry.com/education. You're going to see the individual videos that have been from virtual events past, including the one that Angie did for us about finding women in your family tree, which, if you haven't watched, is a brilliant case study. And you're going to want to have a notebook handy to take notes. So, okay. Let's see. You guys have so many good questions. I wish we could always get to so many of these. Okay. Jane is asking a site question, and Angie, I'm pretty sure you know the answer to this, which is,
Okay.
which is, when you come across information in a record as a genealogist that's wrong, like if the information in the actual record is wrong, that's a problem. If the information has been transcribed incorrectly in the index, that's a problem. Like, how do you handle that?
So if the information in the record is wrong, I usually make a note in the description field of the event for that particular record that the information in that particular record is incorrect, because I can't change the record. The record is what it is, and I can't change it. If it's been indexed incorrectly or transcribed incorrectly from the original document, that's something most collections on Ancestry, there is the option to edit that and put in the correct information so that future researchers will see the correct information from that record.
Perfect. Okay, love that. Okay, Michael asks, besides learning on our own, are there formal courses or certifications you would suggest that would help us just become more proficient? So whether you want to actually become a professional genealogist or not, and then especially, he says, when working with genetic genealogy.
Yes, in fact, right now, today, I'm in Pittsburgh today teaching at the it's the Genealogical Research Institute of Pittsburgh, or GRIP is what they call it. So there are several week-long genealogy institutes that do deep dives on all kinds of different topics, church records, general methodology, DNA. So those week-long genealogy institutes are something that if you really want to take your learning to the next level, I can't recommend them highly enough. So the ones, I don't know, maybe Krista, we can put in, and after we can put links to several of those, but the common ones that I know a lot of colleagues and other friends teach at are the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy. That's typically held in January each year. Then there is IGHR, the Institute for Genealogical Genealogy, IGH, and historical research, and that is held in Augusta, Georgia. Then there's GRIP, where I am now, in Pittsburgh. There are also the African American, an African American Institute. It's not. Is it still called Magi,
Maggie.
Krista?
Maggie.
Okay, Maggie. Okay, thank you. That one, I know our fabulous colleague Mika Smith sometimes teaches there. And then there's another one called GenFed, which goes over all the federal records at NARA, and that's held in Washington, D.C. So there are lots of all kinds of education, outside education options there.
Yeah. So, and that is kind of the thing, you just have to dive into genealogy education institutes is what they're called, or conferences either. If you're kind of newer in your family history journey, you might want to start with a conference, because that's going to give you over 3 or 4 or 5 days, a smattering of information you can kind of pick from and learn a little bit about. And then when you're ready to do a deep dive into a topic like genetic genealogy, you can attend one of those institutes. Okay, Mary has a really great question about research in archives. So as hopefully most of you know, all of the genealogical records in the world are not available digitally, not
Oh
on
my goodness.
or even in all of the collective digital space. And so there's still a lot of historical records that we need to break through so many of the brick walls that people are asking us about, that where you have to actually either go to or contact the archive or the historical society or the courthouse or the records office in whatever town or county or state or country that you need to get more information from. So Mary's question is this: what basic information do you need before researching in an archive? She says, I've wasted too much time looking, but being uncertain about what I'm looking for.
Okay, so for archival research, the big thing you need to know and understand is what collection you need to look at. So the records are not organized by person. They're organized by wherever that particular record set came from. So if a company donated all of their business files to a particular archive, or if a person donated all of their family files to a particular archive, that is going to be organized by person. So you will want to make sure you know the neighborhood, the business, the area that you want to research, instead of looking for records that are organized by persons, such as birth, death, your vital records, your census records, and those kinds of things. So that is the biggest thing I think most people mistake when they're researching an archive. They're going for person instead of subject or area. One trick you can do is search. If you know you're looking for a business collection, search that and then put digital archives after it. So if you're looking, say, for Westinghouse, records from Westinghouse, which was a company, and put Westinghouse archival records and then put digital collection in quotes. And that may help you in your Google search to narrow that down. If you're going instead to some place like the Family History Library in Utah, actually it's Family Search Library now. I don't think I'll ever call it that, but anyway, that same kind of thing. You've got to expand and know the area, the neighborhoods, the churches, the organizations, fraternal organizations your ancestors might have been a part of, because that's how those kinds of records are organized.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah. So always do your searching online, cataloging, looking up from home, so that as soon as you get to the library or the archive, you already know what collections it is you're going to be looking in and can hit the ground running. And I'm always appreciative of those archives that have good catalog.
There's one more website I'm going to just mention. It's called Archive Grid, and
Yeah.
that is very helpful for researching in archives. I just had misplaced that thought momentarily. When you got all of these things coming at you, it can be kind of hard. But Archive Grid, if you're interested in researching, say, at archives in various states or libraries, Archive Grid is where you want to start.
Perfect. Love that. Okay, Steve's question is, as someone nearing retirement, what kinds of volunteer opportunities are there in the family history space, other than the obvious of transcribing records?
Okay, so if you want to volunteer in the family history space, I know every single conference that happens in your local area, they are always desperate for anyone who wants to help them organize, get things ready. Your local genealogy societies and historical societies, they would appreciate your help so, so much. If you need to stay at home or something like that. I know that there are other areas, other offerings. People will need photos digitized. Join a Facebook group for a particular area that you're interested in. They often have special digitization projects or other things that they're working on just for their area. Again, there's other societies that do all those kinds of things. I would really encourage you to just contact your local or not even your local, if it's a historical society that you're or a place you're really interested in, contact the society for that area and ask what volunteer opportunities that there are that you can do. There will always be something. Like I said, anything from helping them plan conferences and organize conferences to digitization projects or helping their patrons understand how to, do their own genealogy.
Yeah. Angie, I know you in the past have served on the board of the National Genealogical Society. Are you still involved with them?
I am not directly involved with them, no, not anymore. I was
Okay.
on the conference committee for NGS for years as well, so I'm kind of relieved not to, but it was a great experience. And like I said, that's how I know, all of these conferences, all of these organizations, they are always grateful for anyone who can help. And my motion lights are going down again.
Oh no.
Let's go
Okay.
with the
Well,
next question.
yeah, well, and I'll just share a little bit about my volunteer experience. I think something that as a professional genealogist, I've always felt it was important to give back to the family history community. And so I currently am serving my my third term on the board of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. And I, in addition to serving in that role, also serve on one of their committees. I'm the co-chair of the marketing committee. And interestingly enough, we are currently actively in the process of gearing up for a volunteer drive because we are always looking for volunteers, not only for the international organization, but for every one of the 90 some odd chapters that we have around the world of local societies. So yeah, that's the greatest way I think to get involved in the community in a volunteer capacity because there's always work to be done. Okay. William asks, do adopted people, in your experience, generally do genealogy on both the biological and the legal trees, or do they choose one over the other?
In my experience, I would say it's about 50-50. Sometimes people, they want to know the history of the people who raised them, and that's who they can, that's who their parents are, that's who raised them. And then other people are also interested in their biological and their genetic roots. One of the nice features about Ancestry is you can keep both your biological lineage and your adoptive lineage in the same tree. You don't have to change your tree. You can keep that all there and you can research both. So you just get more fun and more lines to research, more people to to learn about, more stories for your family.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, I'm seeing quite a few questions about just a couple of technical things on the website. And so I'm going to answer two of those really quickly. One of them is about how you update any of your settings, like that legacy contact. So on Ancestry, if you click on your user profile icon in the top right corner of your screen, you can go to your account settings. And everything having to do with the management of your account can be found there. You'll see a tab for trees and DNA and all sorts of things. So that is your account level settings. That's where you're going to set up your legacy contact. It's where you're going to see the information about whether you have hints turned on or off, like all sorts of settings. So I strongly encourage you to go there and at least explore them so that you're aware of what the settings are that you can do. Now, the other question that I'm seeing come up in various forms have to do specifically with tree settings. And so your account level settings have things that manage how all trees on your account function, but you have to go into the individual tree, and then in the toolbar on the left, click on tree settings. There you can rename your tree if you don't like the name of your tree. You can add that description that Angie was talking about. You can share your tree from there. So all of that is going to be managed within the settings of the specific tree. So account settings, tree settings, I strongly encourage you just go explore, play around with those pages. You're not going to break anything. Just don't turn anything on or off unless you know what it does. Okay. Let's see. We have got okay, so there's variations of this question, right? So if you've exhausted all of the online resources that you know how to use, and you've searched online for digital catalogs to offline records, as professional genealogists, how do you kind of make a research plan or determine what to do next to solve a particular brick wall? And I know like there's a million brick walls, so there's a million variations of this, but are there just some general principles that you apply or methodologies that you apply to take the next step?
Sure. So there's a couple of big ones. The first one is I want to make sure that I actually have thoroughly searched or exhausted all relevant sources of evidence. So I find a lot of times, for example, we don't have DNA tests. People think the DNA test won't help because their ancestors too far back. So make sure that you make DNA testing a part of that research if it is a true brick wall. And if you need to get some help in learning how to use those DNA test results, it is complicated to use them to break down brick walls, but it can be done. So that would be my first suggestion. My second suggestion is expand out your ancestors' pool of people that you know about. So this concept is known as a fan club, friends or family associates and neighbors. And you will want to research those friends, associates, and neighbors just as thoroughly as what you research your own ancestor. And by researching those people on the periphery, you're going to learn things about your ancestors and then be able to break through that brick wall. There are a number of brilliant case studies in the NGSQ, the National Genealogical Society Quarterly. We have those kinds of things at ProGen. If you watch Finding Female Ancestors video that I did with Krista a couple of months ago, that's another example, but you've got to expand out what you know. That's the biggest thing. I often find when people come to us with brick walls, they actually they either have not expanded, or there is an issue with someone in a closer generation. So the son or the grandson of the person, there has been conflicting information there, which has then in turn just kind of perpetuated more errors throughout the line. So you want to just really thoroughly document all of that. And things aren't adding up, there's probably a reason, because those puzzle pieces they often do come together. Sometimes there are brick walls that you just aren't going to be able to break through. I've got a couple. I've seen client brick walls it just can't break through. And it's okay. We may not solve every problem, but the two big things are DNA and then the fan club methodology.
Yeah, I love that. And then my tip for the methodology that I use to break through brick walls is to write everything down that I know and why and how I know it, as if I was going to present this to a professional genealogist or at my genealogy society to get collaborative help. Because there's two things that happens. One is if I'm preparing all that information as if I have to present it, sometimes I find the answer like was hiding in the information that I had. And that process of slowing down and writing it and thinking through how you would present it forces you to pay attention to information in a different way. Because professional genealogists, it's not that we just magically have access to some secret database of records. It's that we know how to look at evidence differently and more thoroughly, and how to correlate it together. And so the process of that, actually writing it as if you're going to present it, is going to change the way you look at evidence. and then maybe actually present it, right? Find a friend, join a genealogy society or an online virtual society, or, kind of walk through it with someone, because not only will you in the process of presenting it sometimes have connection ideas, but they might have feedback for you as well, because they're just not as buried in it as you are.
Yeah, one thing just to piggyback off of that, one thing we always do at ProGen for every single project is we create a research plan. That involves analyzing and looking at all of the information a client has presented to us. And I won't say every time, but there's quite often, especially when it's a difficult recall, there's a piece of information or evidence within the information they've already gathered that they just missed. And we're able to kind of work through that just in the process of analyzing and going over what they've already done. So it's just super valuable to do that as well. I also make really good use of the timeline features, and sometimes create offline spreadsheets that are timelines, so I can get all of those events aligned and go, hey, you know what, this doesn't make sense with this timeline, or what about this correlation over here that happened in this timeline. So timelines are also valuable. But
Yeah.
I find often enough, if it's a true brick wall and all of those things have been done, DNA and fan club, um, those are kind of my last resorts. And DNA
Yeah.
doesn't always work.
Nope. Okay. Okay. We've got a whole bunch of questions around like how many trees. And I know not everybody has the same opinion about this. So I'm curious to hear what you say and if it's different from what I do. But, should I have one tree for my whole family history? Should I have a tree for each side of my family? Should I have a tree for each grandparent? Like, where do you kind of personally fall in how you keep your family history information organized?
Sure. So I was a tree for each grandparent for the longest time, but then DNA came around and I merged them all. So now I have one big tree for everything.
Okay.
Just because of I do so much DNA work. That's the main reason why.
Yeah. So in DNA, y'all, you can only keep your tree needs to be attached to your DNA needs to be attached to the tree that has the representation of all of the ancestors that you know. That's going to help you. It's going to help the algorithms. It's going to help your matches all be able to make additional discoveries. And so I've seen, like I said, there's quite a few questions kind of flying by about how do I split my tree? Should I do one tree? Do I need to merge my trees? Like all variations of that question, basically. And my advice is the same as Angie's, which is one tree to rule them all. And if you have children with a spouse, you might want to have one tree that has both of your families on them as well, so that your children can attach their DNA to that tree so that they have a singular view of their family history. The only time I would ever recommend um, copying out information into a different tree. So it's not splitting your tree. It's not like, oh, now I have two trees that I have to work in. It is copying a branch of information out of your tree and creating a new little baby tree that's just kind of static. This is still your main working research tree. Is if you want to share a portion of the tree with another relative, but you don't want to share your whole tree with them. And you cannot do that in Ancestry, but if you use one of the two software programs that sync with Ancestry, you can do that. Those two programs are Family Tree Maker and Roots Magic. And so they're desktop software programs. You sync your ancestry tree with them, and then you can copy out branches of your family tree fairly simply. And then, of course, if you want to either send them a GEDCOM file of that copy of that branch, or if you want to upload it as a new little, like I said, static tree on Ancestry that you just share with that person, then you can do it that way. I like to keep everything in one place because I don't want to have to try to remember what tree that part of my family tree was in. And also because even though we have yet to prove that my parents are related to one another, there is some intertwining of branches the further back in the family tree you go. So there you go.
Yes.
Okay. Gwen is asking a question that I just really love. She says, what are one or two things that you wish beginner or even intermediate genealogists knew to make research easier?
One or two things I wish. I think that's a really good question. You may have stumped me with that one. I think one of the things I just wish people knew, um, the thing I hope my clients do the most is I need a focused research question. I need to know a focus for what you want to do. A lot of times I will have clients that I work with and they're just like, well, just find me everything. And that is really hard for me to work with because often I don't end up meeting their expectations because they wanted something different than I was able to give. So come up with what you really want to know. What's important to you? Why are you doing family history? Are you doing it to gather the names? Are you doing it to gather the stories? I understand if you're doing it for all of those reasons, but what's most important to you? And that's what I wish more people came to me with is what is the most important thing for them to know.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really good habit for all people to get into, no matter where you fall on the genealogical experience or skill level spectrum, to get really good at asking a specific research question. I think we tend often to kind of just go with the flow or follow the hints or see what new DNA match I have today. Or like we have lots of ways that we all approach family history. And I love a good rabbit hole as much as the next person. But if you really have a specific part of your family tree that you want to know more about, can you narrow that down to, rather than I want to know everything about my grandfather's family, yeah, like, oh, I need to figure out what's the maiden name of his mother? Like, what's the specific question that you're asking? And so that's a good habit to get into just for your own research, but absolutely critical for working successfully with a professional genealogist. Okay, Patricia is asking criteria to be a professional genealogist, and then what you can expect as far as a pay range for being in this profession.
For pay range, I am not 100% sure of our pay range, but I think if you're an independent genealogist, I would expect that most of the my professionals I know that are independent and that are credentialed, they charge at least $100 an hour, if not more. I have a couple of colleagues that charge upwards of $400 an hour. So if you're independent and that's what you're doing, you're going to set your own pay. There is a really good article in this book called Professional Genealogy by Elizabeth Shown Mills, where she kind of outlines how to set your rates. In terms of Ancestry and a couple of the other professional firms, I think starting pay ranges are in the, it's not a career you're going to get rich doing. In the $40,000 to $50,000 a year range is kind of where things start, and then it can go upwards from there.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as qualifications, right, technically this is an unregulated industry, which means that there are no requirements for somebody to call themselves a professional genealogist. However, we strongly encourage people as a community that if you want to be a professional genealogist, that you educate yourself as much as possible, both about family history and kind of figure out if you can pick a niche to specialize in, but also about running a business if you want to work independently, or if you want to come work for one of the larger research firms, do your homework to figure out what their requirements are for hiring. As far as picking a niche, that's something that most of us have to do at some point. So Angie, what are your research specialties?
Say my research specialties are DNA. That's my big one. That's what my degrees are in, are DNA related things. But then I also have expertise in England, and in the Mid Atlantic, Northeast, and like Midwestern states. That those are the areas I focus on.
Fantastic. And my research specialties are Jewish immigration to the United States and Canada, and then also descendancy research. So the incorporation of genetic genealogy, but also just kind of tracing people into modern records wherever possible. So most genealogists kind of start out a little bit as generalists because a lot of us came into this as a hobby to begin with. Not everybody, but a lot of us did. And then we have to just find those educational opportunities. And very often early in our career, something will catch our attention or we'll deep dive into something and learn a lot lot about it. And when people start asking you for help with that thing, that's usually a good indication that you've developed a specialty to a point. And ultimately, if you want to be successful as a professional genealogist, that's going to be super important, is to be able to be the go-to person in the industry for this kind of thing. Because then not only do you have, clients who will come to you for that, you'll attract the right people, but your colleagues in the industry will start referring people to you or subcontracting with you to do that portion of the family tree work that they've been contracted to do. So it's a really integrated industry. Most all of us, know each other or know of each other. We teach with each other. We sit next to each other in institutes because in addition to standing up and teaching an institute course, we also attend them and continue to develop our own skills. So it is kind of a lifelong learning career as well. And if that's not of interest to you, you might want to reconsider your career. Okay. There was, oh shoot, did I lose it? I had as people ask questions, they just keep scrolling as new questions come in. And sometimes I lose the question that I had queued up and I wasn't paying attention.
I'll go ahead, maybe answer a couple. I've seen a couple about foreign records and how we deal with those if you don't speak the language. So I don't speak any foreign languages, but my maternal grandmother's Romanian, and I couldn't always I haven't always worked for genealogists, so I didn't always have colleagues that could do that either. So even 10, 15 years ago, I will use, and now today, we're really lucky. We've got Google Translate. So I use that heavily now. I would use other people. I would visit the family search library and ask for help. They sometimes had people that could help me there. But nowadays I'm using Google Translate a lot, and using some of the AI tools like Claude, to translate those documents and to give me an indication of what they say. So I have done research in other languages, Romance languages in particular, but you learn kind of the key words that are genealogically relevant as you're doing that research. And so you can scan through the old parish records and that old handwriting, you can spot what those dates are, what those names are, what those places are. But I now rely heavily on Google Translate and some of those other AI tools to do foreign research.
Yeah. Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah.
Anne says she has signed up for next year's Roots Tech conference, wants to know, first of all, if I will be speaking. Yes, I will be speaking several times. Angie and I will both be in attendance. Ancestry usually shows up in the exhibit hall there with dozens of our employees, including people from ProGenealogists, people from, the product teams here at Ancestry and the DNA scientists. And we show up and show out, and we are there to talk to you. And so we love that conference. For those of you who aren't familiar with Roots Tech, it's the largest genealogical conference in the world. They usually have around 18 to 20,000 people in person. There's also some streaming, live streaming of it available. I think last year they had almost 2 million people that they live streamed to. So it's a really huge gathering of people who have the same passion and interest that we do. And that's always exciting to me, to be in that space and to talk to customers face to face. So that's the biggest conference. There are, of course, other smaller conferences. The National Genealogical Society has a conference in a different U.S. city every year. Here in the United States, there are conferences in Canada and in England and in Australia as well, some at a national or regional level. The International Jewish Conference is held in a different city in the world every year. The African American Historical and Genealogical Society holds their annual conference, typically in the fall, in October, in an East Coast city in the United States. So if you just do a search for genealogy conferences or visit a website called Conference Keeper, you can see what's happening nationally or regionally or locally to you. And then the other part of Anne's question, and Angie, I'll let you maybe take this, is what would you recommend people come prepared to a genealogy conference to experience? Like, is there anything they should do ahead of time?
I think the big thing you should do ahead of time is decide what you're interested in and mark out the things that you want to go see. And that's got a little bit more complicated the last little while as conferences they do some sessions that are recorded and that you can watch later. They do some that are only in person. And so I like to, mark out what I want to see, then maybe have a couple of secondary things. And if it's something that is going to be recorded and I can watch it later, I might opt to go to another session at that exact same time. So that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. They publish their schedules in advance. You can go through, pick and choose what you want to see. The other piece of advice I would give you is maybe get to the conference location a day or two early so you can settle and you can acclimate. The conferences themselves are exhausting. You will be so tired at the end. I think I used to take, before I had a full-time job, before I worked for ProGen, I used to often basically take a week after any major conference off. I just was so tired from everything. So prepare for that in advance, and then also know that after the conference, you're probably going to be quite tired. You don't need to download or review all of the syllabus material ahead of time or anything like that, but do have a plan. That would be my number one thing. Do have a plan for what you want to see and what you want to get out of the conference.
I love that. Thank you. And yes, they can be exhilarating and exhausting. Okay. Hank's question is, he says he has a lot of information that he's added to his family tree about his grandparents and his great-grandparents, but he hasn't done a lot with the timeline. And he's curious to know if you have best practices or suggestions for what kinds of information we should be keeping track of for our ancestors. Is there a point at which there's too much? Is there a clue that there's too little and we should be looking for more? How to just kind of use that timeline and the person
Timeline?
profile the
Yeah,
best way.
sure. So it kind of depends on the record. So some of Ancestry's record collections are really good at kind of pulling out information from that particular record and putting in the timeline. But often it doesn't pull out certain pieces of information. So say like somebody owns a certain amount of real or personal property, and that's notated on the census. I will pull that information out and put that in the description field for that record event. If it's a marriage and they didn't index the parents' names, I will write in the description field who the parents were. It is limited, that description field is limited, I think, to 256 characters. So you do have to be somewhat brief in what you put there, but you want it to be information, especially if it seems to conflict or yeah, be in conflict with other things you might know. That's the information I want to keep there so I can see it at a glance. Oh, I looked at this record and it doesn't make sense with the information in this other record over here. So I want to keep that in a place where I don't have to click into the record to see that every single time I go to that person and I want to start researching them.
Yeah, I love that. I also tend to overstuff my timeline with information because I've shared my family tree with my siblings and different cousins, and they are not genealogists. They have no desire to be genealogists, but they are curious about and want to stay informed about the discoveries that I'm making in the family stories. And so for them, the more information I put there, the more consumable it is, because very few of them are going to click to open one of those records and actually look at the census. And if they did, they wouldn't necessarily understand what it's telling them. And so I'm doing my family history not just for me because I love the puzzle of it all and I'm fascinated by the whole process. I'm also doing it for them. And so when you keep your audience in mind, it allows you to customize that experience a little bit for them. Okay, Diana asks the question. I've seen various themes about this particular question, but I like the way Diana asks it. So she says she would like to know pro tips or if there are any pitfalls to bear in mind when using Ancestry DNA through lines.
Oh, that's a great question. So through lines is great. You will get through lines. It aggregates your DNA matches and shows them how Ancestry thinks, based on other user-submitted trees, they all descend from a common ancestor. So the big pitfall with through lines is that it does not factor in any amount of shared DNA into that through line. It's just if you have a DNA match at all with that other person, then they will show up as a descendant of that ancestor. So that means if somebody has done incorrect research and that ancestor is not actually in your tree, or they got the wrong Samuel Smith in the tree, you could see incorrect information or inaccuracies because that is based on trees. So it's the biggest pitfall of through lines is that they rely on user submitted trees and not the amount of shared DNA to show you what those relationships are. I
Okay.
do know that we're trying to change that, but we'll hopefully get that to improve.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Jimmy asks, is there, who do we contact at Ancestry if we don't want somebody to do the research for us, but we need some help doing it? Because right now on Ancestry is a do-it-yourself experience. So your subscription pays for access to all of those historical records that allow you to kind of put the jigsaw puzzle together yourself. And then kind of at the whole other end of the spectrum, you can pay pro-genealogists or hire a professional genealogist to do it for you or to do pieces of it for you. So the question, I think, is what do we have kind of in the middle that allows people to still have the fun of doing it, but with some assistance?
You know this, Krista. I have a great answer for this because I have spent the last few months working on launching a new product for AncestryProGenealogists, and that product is called Ancestry Advisor. And what this is you can purchase either one 30-minute session with a genealogist where I'm one of those genealogists. I'll talk to you, answer your questions. Paul Graham's another one. Who was here a couple of weeks ago. He's another one, and we have a couple of other genealogists also on this product. So you can purchase an Ancestry Advisor session, one 30-minute session for $149, or you can purchase a bundle of 3 Ancestry Advisor sessions for $379. And so with the bundle of 3, for example, you could ask me a question, I give you homework, you go do all those things I suggested you do, then you set up the next session with me. And we do that 3 times. And then if you want to keep going, purchase another bundle of 3 sessions. So yeah, that is at progenealogist.com/ancestry-advisor. And we'll, I think, hopefully get a link to that in the comments.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite new things because when I was a kind of a newer genealogist, I wrote into ProGenealogists who were not acquired by Ancestry at the time. They were independent from Ancestry. And the founder of ProGen wrote back to me with a very lengthy email about education and then also a sales pitch. But also I was like, but I don't want that. I just want somebody I can come in and talk to and ask a couple of questions. I want to be able to do the research myself. So I've been pretty passionate about this and I'm excited to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see how it goes. And that's one of the things that I'm also very passionate about. So what Angie's talking about is kind of like a middle of the spectrum kind of offering that allows you to have that help. What I'm doing down here with these virtual event Wednesdays is free education in as many ways as I can. But I look at this list of questions. I mean, we're up to 505 questions that we haven't even gotten to answer yet. And I know how desperately you all want help and wish I could help every one of you personally, but that's not scalable, unfortunately. And so one of the things that I do with this free education, one of the things that Angie and her colleagues will be doing with this coaching advisor program is just really being able to meet you where you are. But what we need from you in return is that you listen to see if you can figure out how the answers we're providing fit the context of your specific problem. And so I think we may have time for one or two more questions. And I think this is one of those situations. So I've seen tons of you asking, I need help with this brick wall. I need help with that brick wall. I don't know about how to find this person in my family tree. And here is the answer, but you're going to have to figure out how to apply it to your specific situation, which is if I've looked at all the hints, if I've done the searching on Ancestry, if I've looked at family search and done Google searches and checked the archives catalog, like at what point do I decide the piece of information I'm looking for either doesn't exist or I need to come at it from a different direction? Like, how do we make that determination as a new or intermediate genealogist?
So I would say, as a new or intermediate genealogist, if you can't find it, I would say at that point, and you're not, you can do one of two things. I would say go to some of the more advanced institutes, like we talked at the beginning. Get that education, because I can guarantee you, every time I watch a lecture from any of my colleagues, I learn something. And I remember or learn about a database or a search technique or a strategy I didn't know. So unless you're confident that you really have gone to those lectures and you've learned everything there is to learn, and I haven't, for sure. One of the things I love about ProGen is that when I get stuck on a problem, I've got, 80 other colleagues I can ask about it. So that is one of my favorite things, and I am very lucky to have that available. But educate yourself. Another resource that I use, and I hope I don't get in too much trouble, I don't get in trouble for mentioning this, is the Family Search Wiki.
Yeah.
That is my go-to source for seeing what records are available for what location and during what time periods. They have that all listed out, and whether or not Family Search has those records, whether or not Ancestry has those records, or another website has those records. So use the Family Search Wiki as well to make sure you've done your due diligence in terms of really figuring out if all the records are there. I feel like there was something else I was going to say, but I think let's try to get to one more question.
Okay, yeah, and I just kind of want to double down on that. I think for beginners and even intermediate genealogists, one of the things you need to learn how to do is figure out, does the record I'm looking for even exist? Because if the record doesn't exist, if the state didn't start keeping birth records until 1907, or if the courthouse burned down or whatever, if the record doesn't exist, no amount of searching is going to find it. You need to figure out, then, is there another kind of record that will give me that same information that I'm looking for? And that's where exposing yourself to the Family Search Wiki, to reading the National Genealogical Society quarterly, going to genealogy conferences, listening to these virtual events, talking to people at the local genealogical society. That's going to kind of expand your mind about what's possible and where you can find records that will help solve your problem. So there are some brick walls that may never get broken down. There are some brick walls that take decades to break down. But then there are some that are just a matter of, we just need to learn a little something extra about it. Okay, unfortunately, I think we're out of time. So, Angie, is there any famous last words you want to share before we wrap up?
I don't know that I have any favorite last words other than, happy hunting, which is what you always say.
Yeah,
You'll
yeah,
find your ancestors.
yeah.
They're out there. Don't give up.
Okay, well, so for those of you who have joined me for a virtual event before, you know the drill, which is, as we wrap up, I would love in the chat, not the Q&A, in the chat, if you would please leave one thing you learned today. That's super helpful for us to know what's resonating with people, what things are catching on. It's also, I think, super helpful for you to actually type it out. I firmly believe it's going to help you remember it more. Now, if you need to go back and rewatch this video, those of you who are watching this live are going to get an email as soon as the replay of Zoom is available. So you'll be able to come and rewatch this here on the Zoom platform as soon as you get that email. Those of you who are watching this on YouTube, obviously, it's already on YouTube. But for the rest of you, in the future, if you ever miss a live event, you can always watch it on our YouTube channel. We usually get those uploaded within 3 to 5 business days. You can also go to that ancestry.com/education page, and that's where you'll see both our upcoming events and those replays there. So again, let us know what you learned today. If we didn't get to your question today, I am so sorry, but hopefully you learned something that you can apply to your specific question. I also think that at some point I just need to start answering questions on Instagram or something. Like, how do I reach the masses, Angie? How do we answer all the questions?
You know what? Let's chat about that. We'll figure it out.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you,
Yep.
everyone. Until next time, I'm Krista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.